He was running before he even knew his legs were moving. Dr. Ellis Harmon sprinted through the tunnel with everything he had, his helmet light slashing wildly through the darkness, his boots hitting wet rock, his breath coming in ragged, desperate bursts. Behind him, from somewhere deep in the belly of the Solano Mine, came a sound that had no name. Not mechanical, not geological, not anything his 20 years of scientific training had ever prepared him to categorize. It was low and rhythmic and vast, like something enormous breathing in the dark, and it was getting closer. He broke into open air and collapsed on the ground outside the mine entrance, chest heaving, hands pressed flat against the cold earth. He lay there for a long time, staring up at a sky full of stars, listening to his own heartbeat gradually slow. He never went back underground again. But that was the end of the story. To understand how a man who had spent his entire career mocking superstition ended up running for his life out of a mountain in the middle of the night, you have to go back to where it started. You have to go back to Marcus Vael. Marcus Vael was the kind of man who saw everything in the world as either an asset or an obstacle. People, places, relationships, principles, all of it ran through the same cold calculation in his mind and came out the other side labeled one of two things. He had built his mining corporation from a single regional operation into an international extraction empire by being faster, harder, and less sentimental than every competitor he had ever faced. He didn't lose sleep over decisions. He didn't second guess. He identified what he wanted and he moved toward it with the focused, remorseless momentum of a machine. So when he acquired the rights to the Solano Mine, a supposedly exhausted, abandoned gold mine buried deep in a remote mountain range, the people around him assumed he had lost his mind. Every geological survey conducted over 40 years had returned the same verdict. Empty. Dry rock. No viable deposits. Nothing worth the cost of reopening. But Marcus hadn't bought the surveys. He had bought the rumor. The rumor was old and stubborn and refused to die no matter how many scientists dismissed it. Workers from decades past, men who had gone into the Solano on night shifts before the mine was sealed, had reported veins of gold so dense and so close to the surface they could be pulled out by hand. Rich, pure, extraordinary gold. But only after sunset. When those same workers returned in daylight, the veins were gone. Bare rock, as if the gold had never existed at all. The workers stopped coming back. The mine was sealed. The company that owned it quietly collapsed. And the legend grew in the dark the way legends do, slowly, persistently, passed from mouth to mouth until it reached Marcus Vael, who heard it and did not think about spirits or thresholds or the sacred. He thought about the number 4.7 billion and picked up his phone. He needed someone to go in and find him a scientific explanation before he brought in full operations. Someone brilliant enough to figure it out and desperate enough to take the job without asking too many questions. He found Drive. Ellis Harmon, once one of the most respected geological researchers in the field, now professionally disgraced after a project collapse that had cost investors millions and cost Ellis everything else. His reputation, his funding, his confidence. Ellis didn't believe the legend for a single second. But he needed the money. He took the job. The first 3 days inside the Solano Mine confirmed everything Ellis had expected. Nothing. Dry rock, standard geological composition, no trace of gold deposits in any of his daytime readings. He was already drafting the report in his head, apologetic in tone, definitive in conclusion, when the old man found him. Datu Elias came to Ellis's temporary camp at dusk without announcement and sat down across from him with the unhurried stillness of a man who had never once been in a rush because he already knew how everything turned out. He was ancient in the way that certain people are ancient, not frail, not diminished, but distilled. Like time had burned away everything unnecessary and left only the essential. "You have been inside during the day," Datu Elias said. It was not a question. "I have," Ellis said. "There's nothing there. Come back at night," the old man said, "and tell me that again." Ellis almost didn't. He almost filed his report and went home and told Marcus the rumor was exactly what every rational person had always said it was, a story. But something made him stay. Some last thread of scientific obligation, he told himself later. Just to be thorough. Just to rule it out completely. He went in after sunset with his instruments and a fresh set of batteries and absolutely no expectation of finding anything. Every sensor he carried went immediately and completely off the charts. The gold was there, Physically, measurably, undeniably there, veins running through the rock walls so thick and so luminous they caught the light from his helmet and threw it back at him in warm, pulsing waves. He pressed his hand against the wall and felt heat radiating from the stone like a fever, like something alive running just beneath the surface. His instruments confirmed everything. His eyes confirmed everything. And then he heard it. Deep in the tunnel, from somewhere further down than his maps showed any passage going, a sound rose through the rock. Low, rhythmic, enormous. Ellis stood very still for 30 seconds with every hair on his body standing upright, telling himself it was a geological phenomenon, telling himself there was an explanation, telling himself to be rational and calm and scientific. Then he ran. He called Marcus from outside the mine at 2 in the morning, hands still shaking, and told him the gold was real. He also told him that something else was real and that they needed to proceed carefully. Anthropological consultation, scientific review, full community engagement before a single extraction tool was brought anywhere near that mountain. Marcus flew in within 48 hours with an operations team, industrial equipment, and lawyers who had already drafted agreements that removed the village from any stake in the site entirely. He stood in front of Ellis's data with the expression of a man who had already made every decision that mattered and was now simply waiting for the world to catch up. "You found me my gold mine, Doctor," he said, and he smiled the way people smile when they have already won. "Your job is done, Marcus," Ellis said, and his voice was very quiet and very careful. 3 workers from the original operation disappeared inside that mine. 3. They sealed it for a reason. Whatever is in there is not just geological and you know it. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "Everything has a rational explanation," he said. "You told me that yourself when I hired you." "I was wrong," Ellis said. Marcus turned back to his operations team and began giving instructions. Ellis stood there and watched him and felt something cold settle in his chest, the particular helplessness of a man who can see exactly what is coming and cannot stop it. Saya had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. She was Datu Elias's granddaughter, 26 years old, educated in international law, and possessed of a patience and strategic precision that had been inherited directly from her grandfather and sharpened by years of watching corporations circle her community's land like something patient and hungry. She had built the legal case for indigenous territorial rights over the Solano site document by document, contact by contact, year by year. She had been waiting for someone exactly like Marcus Vael to walk through the door. The emergency injunction landed on Marcus's legal team the same week his equipment arrived on site. Saya gave 3 international interviews in 4 days. The story, the legend, the science, Ellis's documented findings, the corporation moving in over community objection, spread globally with the velocity of something people had been waiting to hear. Scientists debated publicly. Documentarians flew in. The hashtag Protect Solano gathered momentum that no PR team could slow. Marcus ignored all of it and began night extraction operations in direct violation of the pending injunction. The gold flowed. The money moved. Marcus walked through his operation site at midnight looking at veins of gold emerging from the rock under floodlights and felt the specific euphoria of a man who believes he has beaten the world. Then his workers started disappearing. The first 2 went missing on a Tuesday. Night shift, deepest tunnel, cameras showing nothing but static from the point where the passage curved downward. No bodies, no signals, no trace. Marcus paid the families, signed the agreements, and told his team to keep digging. The 3rd disappearance happened 4 days later. Ellis found out on a Thursday morning and drove to the site and walked directly into Marcus's operations tent and stood across the table from him and said, "3 people are gone, Marcus. 3 people who went into that mountain and did not come out. How many more before you stop?" Marcus didn't look up from his maps. "Get off my site, Doctor." "Look at me," Ellis said, and something in his voice made Marcus look up. "You were warned by the village. You were warned by me. You are being warned right now by whatever is inside that mountain. And you are choosing to keep going. That is not business anymore. That is something else entirely." Marcus held his gaze for a long moment. Then he called security. Ellis went straight to Saya. He gave her everything, his original data, his recordings from inside the mine after sunset, the documented disappearances Marcus had buried, the internal communications Ellis had seen and memorized and written down word for word the moment he was alone. All of it, handed over in a single folder, with no conditions and no hesitation. Saya released it to 3 international news organizations simultaneously at 6 in the morning on a Friday. By noon the story had consumed every major platform on Earth. By evening government authorities had arrived at the Solano site to suspend operations pending investigation into the missing workers. Marcus's investors began pulling out within 24 hours as the legal exposure became unsurvivable. The injunction was upheld. The equipment went silent. Marcus fought through every legal channel available to him for 8 months. He lost each one with a consistency that felt almost deliberate, as if the outcomes had been decided somewhere beyond the courtroom. The Solano mine was placed under permanent indigenous community protection. No extraction, no development. A joint scientific research agreement allowed the phenomenon to be studied under strict protocols set entirely by the village. Datu Elias reviewed and approved every condition personally. The 3 missing workers were never found. Scientists published papers. Conferences were held. Theories were proposed and dismantled and proposed again. None of them reached a conclusion that fully satisfied the evidence Ellis had documented. Ellis himself declined every invitation to speculate publicly. In one interview, pressed for his personal theory about what existed inside the Solano mine, he was quiet for so long the interviewer thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "I think there are places on this earth that were never meant to be owned. And I think the earth is far more patient than we are. It waits. And eventually, it collects." The mine sat sealed. The village tended the land around it the way they always had, with ritual, with reverence, and with the particular piece of people who know they are living exactly where they are supposed to be. And every night, without fail, the mountain glowed faintly from within. Warm, rhythmic, breathing,